You started a business when you were 18 years old. So what
Yes,
made you do it?
that's a great question. So I was 18, I was in law school, and I felt very different. At that point, I was in one of the top law schools in the country, and there weren't many people who looked like me. I also, coming from a working class background, I found that people had lots of presumptions. So, the kind of, oh, where did you go to school question would come up quite often. And I had no idea why people from not from London were asking where I went to school. I thought, you're not going to know my school. It took me about a year and a half to realize that there are, you know, a set of schools that everybody knows because they're in intervarsity competitions and they, you know, go to balls together. I just didn't know about this world. And I was in law school where all, the private school kids get together. So I went through this phase of feeling very different. And at this point, I was still chemically straightening my hair. My mum had always done that since, I was a little girl. It was all I knew. But I have eczema. I have lots of allergies. So I was constantly suffering from burns on my scalp, on my neck. I was just covered in scabs and scars. And a friend of mine essentially said, why are you doing this? And it was the first time someone had asked me that because I thought this is just what you do. You have to fit in. You have to straighten your hair. You have to apply the chemicals, get out the GHDs, burn yourself in every way possible in order to almost have permission to show up in spaces where you don't feel that you belong. And I started writing about this. I started blogging. I was a bit of a nerd. I used to build websites and I had a blog and a YouTube channel. So I started talking about what I was learning on ingredients in the cosmetics that we use. And I learned that the chemicals I was using to straighten my hair in relaxer, of course, they were giving me burns because the main ingredient was caustic soda. That's the main
Right.
ingredient in drain unblocker and
I was going to
oven
say, isn't that
cleaner.
drain and blocker? Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is. And we're applying this, to the scalps of little girls with afros without a second thought as to the health risks of it. And I had people comment on my blog from all around the world, including this one really shook me. Someone who worked in a morgue in the States who said that they found on the brain of African American women, there would be this scarring pattern. And when they asked someone more senior about it, it was really horrifying. They were told by this senior doctor, oh, it's because of all the chemicals they put in their hair. So we're applying chemicals to our scalp
Wow.
that are leaching through the skull onto the brain and causing scarring over years. So that was enough for me to give up chemically straightening my hair. Then I didn't know what to do. So I started to look at, okay, how do I look after my afro hair? I've never had to do this. And a very long story short, ended up starting a business to solve that problem for myself and for, it turned out, tens of
The
thousands
world.
of women and men around the globe. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, that's classic in terms of an entrepreneurial process. You have
Absolutely.
a problem, you identify it, you find a way. I mean, how did you even go about finding a way to solve that? Do you know what's funny? And I hadn't even made this link before we started recording. So I've started doing on social media kind of little carousels digging into mothers who have sort of bucked the trend and built phenomenal businesses in history. Because
Oh,
it's all very well, kind of, we'll talk about what we're doing now, but I think actually seriously disadvantaged women at a time when it was not really possible and the odds are stacked against you did manage to build businesses and raise their children. And there is an incredible story, I don't know if you know about her, of a lady called Madam CJ Walker
I knew
in
you were going to
America.
say Madam CJ
Yeah.
Walker. Yes.
And it's phenomenal. And actually it's so crazy to me as you're talking because as I was researching her story, I mean, she was the first child in her family not to be born into slavery. So we're going back a long time, and obviously she's in America, but she was experiencing similar symptoms to what you're talking about now, and this is such a long time ago.
Yes.
She was losing her hair, she had like alopecia, she was suffering with skin conditions, and exactly the same story as yours. And it's kind of insane that she did that, and, her business was kinda taking off in the early 20th century, and 100 years later, there is still space for this for you to move into because it's not yet solved. Despite everything that she did, your mum is still putting this stuff on your head from a young age because it's just what you do. And isn't that
Yeah.
fascinating?
Oh, it's a complex story. Madam C.J. Walker actually invented the relaxer, the chemical straightener. But of
Okay.
course, at that time, we didn't have the science to know how harmful it was. So
Yeah.
she was trying to solve a problem and she solved some problems. And this is often the way that progress works. We solve
Yeah,
one
yeah.
problem, we cause five others, someone else picks up the baton and runs with it. I think it's incredible that she was the first self made female millionaire anywhere.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
incredible she was able to do that. And she faced so many rejections, so much struggle.